London, Getty, London, September 21st. I am coming to London, and Left It Wall is going to be screening at the Bill Murray at 3 p.m. That's September 21st, the Bill Murray, 3 p.m. It will be the only UK screening of Left It Wall. Can't wait to see you there. Grab your tickets now at romplicone.com. London, can't wait to see you again. It's been too long. romplicone.com for tickets. See you September 21st. Episode 53, Zeynab Day. Zeynab Day is a campaigner, activist, and journalist. She's also a mom and an entrepreneur. She's lived many lives and overcome many obstacles. We've crossed paths in similar circles and seen experiments succeed and fail. We reflect on that and more. Also, given some circumstances in my personal life, there's a beautiful coincidence to the timing of this episode. Please welcome to the show, Zeynab Day. Let's start at the beginning. So, where are you from, and how did you grow up? And then, final part of this three-parter to open. How did you get interested in politics?
Oh, man. Okay. So, I am from London, Kentucky. So down in Appalachia, coal country. But I grew up here in the mountains with my grandparents a good portion of my childhood. And then another portion of it, I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky. So I saw a little bit of the metro, a little bit of the country, you know. Mm-hmm. And when I grew up in Lexington, I grew up in a predominantly lower income Black neighborhood up there. So I kind of saw, it was interesting because I saw similar problems in both places, as far as, you know, the impacts of poverty, the impacts of not having enough, that sort of thing. My dad is Iranian, so he's Iranian American. He met my mom, who's Scots Irish, as Appalachian as you can be to the core. A little bit of Scots Irish, a little bit of, you know, she's got some indigenous, family, and so that's pretty common for the makeup of Appalachia. So I had a very interesting mix where I grew up through a lot of my childhood is Muslim. And then when I was 14, I was baptized as a Christian. So what
led to that? Was that, did you choose that, or was it just sort of, we're in Kentucky, or what happened there?
I started going to church because I had been in and out of foster care too. So I kind of had one of those rough growing ups where, you know, there was divorce, abuse, alcoholism, things like that within my family, particularly from my father. I think he had a hard time coping with the cultural differences here in the United States with the racism. And he was targeted by police. So he was in and out of the carceral system when he was doing nothing, to the point where he just started doing criminal activity. Because what's the point if you're getting arrested all the time and you're not doing anything, you're getting beat up by cops, you know, then you go toward where you can go to get protection and to get work and to get, you know. So that targeting, because he was an Afro-Iranian, so he was a dark man with a fro, you know. He was I did see the impacts of racism growing up too, and the carceral system and that pattern. I mean, one time when I was young, I saw cops pull my dad out of his car, beat him up, and kick in the taillight as an excuse for why they pulled him over.
Oh,
basically, you know, that stay out of our neighborhood kind of thing. And he didn't do anything. We would go to the store and they would follow him around all the time. And after a while, he just started stealing from the stores. They're going to follow him. You know, he found it as a challenge. They're going to stop him every time. They're going to do this. Instead of a deterrent, it pushed him to do it. And he started drinking. He started, you know, getting involved in the wrong kind of, I guess he was looking for protection. He was looking for community, and he sought it out in a place that wasn't healthy.
So how did you take all that in as a kid? I mean, how did you just process these people hate my dad for no reason?
It was, you don't process it really when you're young. You don't really, at least I couldn't. I didn't process it until I was way older and I understood. I sort of went the other extreme route not extreme route, but I went the other route when I was younger, and I dug into this. I'm going to bootstrap. I'm going to get myself out of this. I'm going to work hard, even if I have to when I graduated high school, I was already working 2 jobs when I was 15. My idea was I can bootstrap out of this poverty. I can bootstrap out of this situation. If I build strong enough, and my mom and we mended our relationship. I was able to forgive her for the things that, had happened when I was younger. And I wanted to take care of her. I wanted to take care of my family. I wanted to be self-sufficient. And I was highly independent. I moved out when I was 17, got my own place, was walking to work. I didn't have a vehicle for 3 years.
What'd you do for work?
I was in the restaurant industry.
Right on.
So I was a waitress, a cook, did every position you could do. And pretty quickly I went into management. So they had me go into management roles pretty fast. When I was 23, I even tried to start my own restaurant. It was Italian.
Nice.
It was really good. I feel like I maybe should have went with gyros or like Iranian food. I probably would have been better off, but it was delicious. But it was I had a rich guy in town start a business just down the street from the one that I had started that was almost exactly like it. And my mom was decorating his house, and she used to do murals and paintings, and she's an artist. So she was doing like the interior of these people's homes, and the wife overheard it. And she's like, I want a project. And so she literally took my exact idea and then replicated it on down the road. And of course it was fancier, bigger. They could hire staff. They could do all these things. So, Mom's like, I wished I would have never told them. I was just so proud of you. I was like, it's okay. You don't know that they're going to run and do that. But the competition.
What was your go-to dish at the Italian place? What was like
spaghetti.
The killer? Yeah.
I know that sounds typical, but our spaghetti sauce, we would wait and I would let it sit for 24 hours and then serve it. So it would have that very, very rich, slow cooked from scratch kind of taste to it. And bread. We had a really good kind of Italian loaf that was made fresh daily. And that was dipped into like a homemade roasted garlic butter that was served on the side.
Oh, lovely. Wow.
Mm-hmm. With the big chunks of, sweet roasted garlic. I love to cook. That's my Zen time is cooking. But
that sounds delicious. I wish I could have tried it.
So for 15 years, I was in restaurants. I worked at a place called The Pub and traveled all over the country opening up stores. I lived in Florida. I lived in Cleveland. I lived in Columbus. I lived in Tennessee for a while doing that. That was cool. The place served, and this was back when hipsters were just becoming hipsters, right? And everyone there wore like kilts, and we had 42 beers on tap.
Yeah.
Insufferable now, but back then it was edgy, because this was the early 2000s. So it was fun. That was a fun atmosphere. I worked there for a long time, for about 6 years, and traveled and did that. But then when the 2008 market crash happened, they started closing down stores. And they started laying off workers, and I lost my job there. Now, even then, it wasn't enough pay to get me out of poverty. I was still working 2 jobs. I was paying rent. It's like, no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't save up. And at that point, I'd had about $18,000 saved, which to me was insane, but it was for a down payment for a house. So I had actually made it to that point. I had good credit. I couldn't get hired in 2008. So many couldn't, right? But I also realized that my last name had an impact outside of restaurant work. Zeynab Abdullahi was my name at the time. And I had realized that I wasn't getting callbacks, or that people were looking at me weird when I went in to apply at different types of jobs other than restaurant work. So I dropped my last name, Abdullahi, and I started using Day, which is my mom's maiden name, which I used some in high school and stuff. So I had used Day before. Both were legally my name. I just had one of those long Iranian names that had my mom's maiden name in it too. So once I started writing Zeynab Day on my applications, I started getting callbacks.
Oh,
so part of it, I think, was the boom and bust. And the other part, I think, was just sheer
racism once again.
Post 9/11 hysteria, racism that still was prevalent, and we still see it now, right?
Oh, of course.
So
you can speak to it more than I can, but
yeah, I still ended up in all kinds of different jobs, mostly restaurant. I stayed in the restaurant industry, worked 2 or 3 restaurant jobs, and then I became a mother and a single mom at that. And I decided to go to college. So I went back to college. I got a dual degree in public relations and journalism. I worked as a reporter the whole time. I worked a full-time job, 2 degrees, a minor in geology because I love rocks.
Nice.
No, I really wanted to work on climate change and deal with ecological issues, especially being from Appalachia. So I thought this minor would be good to help me get in and do messaging and things like that, or at least cover it as a journalist. And yeah, I'm sorry, there's a lot to it, but that's sort of what led me to getting into politics the first time was
it's cool.
That work in college and stuff. I was always obsessed with it. When I was 4, I started reading encyclopedias, and my mom has pictures of me falling asleep like this with encyclopedias on my face.
Mm.
Like I followed politics and history my whole life. But I never thought that I could get involved in it until I went to college and started covering it.
Are you into music at all?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Are you a Bad Religion fan?
No, I haven't listened to. I'm not. It's not that I'm not a fan. Bad Religion is just one of those bands that I never listened to that much.
Well, you should give them a spin, and the reason I ask specifically about them is because their lead singer Greg Graffin is also a geologist.
Really?
Or he's done some work. I think his actual PhD might not be in geology, but it's played a role in his studies and a significant one. He's like one of those kind of genius PhD people, and he taught at UCLA for a while on the side. And he has this book that talks about geology a lot called Anarchy, Evolution in a World Without a God.
I've heard of that book. I've not read it.
You got to read it because it somehow juxtaposes him growing up with punk rock and how that also scratched the back of his academic work and vice versa. He's an incredibly interesting guy. Hopefully I'm going to get him on this show before I reach number 1,000. He's definitely high on the list. But yeah, you should listen. I'll send you some tracks. You should dive into. They've been around for about 40 years, so you there's a lot to choose from. So, but I'll start you with some of the classic stuff where it's like, if you like this, you're gonna like the rest of it. If you don't like this, you're probably not gonna like it. But
I've probably heard a lot of Bad Religion and just didn't realize it was Bad Religion. That's
You've definitely heard them at some point. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they were ever played at the pub, but but you definitely heard them at some point in your passings, I'd imagine.
I was in a band. I was in a punk band.
I didn't know that. Oh, see,
when I was straight out of high school, and I've written music and I write lyrics and I played bass and guitar. Back in the day, I played violin when I was little until I was like 15, from the age of like 3 to 15. But music, I think I've talked to you a little bit about this I've seen us tweet similar things before, but I think a lot of my political education came from music, came from bands like Megadeth or the Dead Kennedys. Dead Kennedys would sing about, that they would, perform about Vietnam, and I would have to go and look up who was Pol Pot. I'm gonna research this.
Yeah.
So some of my education came from, I loved Rage Against the Machine when I was a teenager. I feel like we don't have that now. We don't have that same kind of political education from music.
I mean, that's so hard because there's so much music out there and it's so hard to find. And I think there's a lot of great music going on because I feel like there always is. You just have to really do the due diligence to look for it. And I feel like in the world we're living in, there probably isn't as much of that political education going on because I feel like mostly, because of the internet age that we're in, most of the people who are into that kind of music, they're already on board with the cause. You know,
Mhm.
like if I get into a left wing punk band, I don't need them to teach me anything necessary. Well, we're always learning things, but you know what I mean. It's not like I'm not familiar with left wing ideas already. They're not going to introduce like a left wing idea to me. They're just going to be doing music that I enjoy, and you know, so I don't
Same
know.
with the clubs where they play now. They're targeting specific audiences, and specific
Yeah.
clubs will hire. There's less diversity. I love the live music scene, and I haven't been. I haven't. I'm a mom now, so I don't get to do it that much. I don't get to go out and listen to new crazy bands that show up in Lexington or whatever. But I had noticed in the last few years that I had been frequenting that the clubs have kind of morphed into the different types of music styles more so than it used to be. So you're less likely to go and get something more diverse by just going out to different clubs. But that's how I noticed it was in my area. That might not be true for somewhere like California.
Well, I think yes, that's definitely a thing now. However, I think on the other side of it, I feel like more than ever before, like there's sort of this big embrace that punk rock itself is more of an attitude than anything else. I mean, I don't get to go to a ton of shows either, but when I do go, and especially when it's younger people, I do notice, oh, this first act is a one person contained music act where they're doing this weird calypso type music and in this weird circus type element music from their computer, and they're singing with it. And then this next act is this folk act, and this next act is just a straightforward punk band. But it all makes sense together, and it's all sort of like
Cool.
in a unified scene. And I think that's really cool. I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of stuff going on that I'm just not hip to because I'm not 20 anymore. Not only that, but I'm definitely not 16 anymore. And it's a different game than it used to be, I'd imagine, because I can't, and I know you and I are around the same age. I remember those days where you kind of knew about certain venues in certain towns, and if you played those venues, they sort of had a built-in audience that trusted them, so they were turned on to new bands that way. And that was still the way to do it. You still kind of had to get in the van, as Henry Rollins would say. And the internet started helping. The internet started being part of it. You would check out MySpace before you went to the show or whatever. But there was still the king of the castle, so to speak, was still kind of getting in the van and going to these places. And that just doesn't really exist anymore. And
people get big off of their TikTok audio.
Yeah. It's
how it happens now.
Yeah. So describe your history working in electoral politics. Like how did you start, and what are the different things you've done? Give me kind of a snapshot of all that.
Sure. I started covering public policy and that sort of thing when I was in college. But after I graduated, I was an investigative journalist. After I graduated, I was trying to find something to follow, and I stumbled upon the Young Turks. And at the time, I was like, this is interesting. But what really got me interested was occasionally they would have Michael Brooks on. Now, the rest of them I would kind of agree with, kind of not. But I thought Michael Brooks was a badass. Let me just say it. And so I was like, man, this is interesting. And I was looking for a place to do investigative journalism and to cover public policy. So I signed up on their page. But then when they were still doing the Wolfpack, I submitted my resume, and I had just watched a show about Brand New Congress. So I was like, whoa, I love this idea, because at the time I was working on something called the Big Purple. And the Big Purple was going to be a way to tackle the fact that the Democratic Party has abandoned so many state houses, which I'm covering right now, because so many people don't realize that the 50-state strategy was abandoned, and Republicans came in, the GOP came in, and they dumped a ton of money in these states. And what sort of took up the vacuum in a lot of these states was the Libertarian Party became sort of more left-wing. The Libertarian Party started taking on social justice issues, but they were still kind of Ayn Rand when it came to economics. So,
well, and I
not
would say as a
exactly.
whole, they're definitely not that way anymore. I mean, I'm
Oh,
sure that
no.
some still are, but now you have like what's that? The Mises
The
Caucus.
Mises Caucus are Nazis, man. Like literally,
They're
some of them are literally Nazis.
yeah, I mean, some of them are like they're literal Nazis, and then I know a lot of people, at least out here in California, that they were part of the Libertarian Party, where it was basically live and let live, and we really want cannabis to just be okay. And I still had my economic disagreements with them, but socially they were pretty much just let people live their lives. Who are we to judge? That has changed, and I'm sure it hasn't.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's not a monolithic thing because the Libertarian Party is, a pretty decent sized party. So I'm sure not every single member feels the same, but I feel like as a whole, it's not quite what it used to be. And there's definitely some influential people that have pushed it really far to the right.
Oh, yeah, it's been co-opted in the same way the progressive movement was co-opted, but it was co-opted by the Republican Party. And it was a way to sort of sheep herd people back into the party. I mean, that's why they were saying things like Angela McArdle was trying to get people to endorse Donald Trump instead of endorsing Chase Oliver, who's running.
Well, isn't that another big issue with the like Mises Caucus and stuff? Because isn't Chase Oliver, he's gay? And right, and so they were mad
like pride parades all decked out. The dude is, and I don't agree with his economic policy, but then he does have very, justice lined. Like he supports reproductive freedom. He supports police demilitarization.
Well,
he
then
supports
didn't
ending qualified immunity.
Didn't certain factions? That's why I'm kind of like, well, it can't totally be a complete monolith because they elected this guy or chose this guy to be their nominee, but then on the same token, there were factions of the party that were so furious about it and just hate him. And it's not policy reasons why they hate him. It's because of him being gay that they hate him. At least that's definitely how it appears.
Yeah, which is so weird that, libertarians would care if someone was gay. That's how you can tell how far they've come in their party to like.
It's like just join the GOP at that point.
Yeah, I don't understand
join the GOP at that point. If you want a party that just on the surface hates the LGBTQ community, you have that with the Republicans. Mm-hmm. If you want a party that's not really going to help the LGBTQ community, and unless it helps them, you got the Democrats. I mean, it's like you got like, why not just be in one of the corporate parties if that's how you feel? But
it's like the Working Families Party. Be Democrats already. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what. Yeah, so you started doing work with Brand New Congress. Was that the first like major gig you got, or?
In politics, yeah. The first after college, the first sort of, but I had done volunteer work for years. So I worked with like the Fairness Coalition in Lexington, Kentucky, that was fighting for LGBTQ rights. Kentucky was the first state to give broad statewide LGBTQ equality rights in the country. So and that was back in the 90s, which is wild. People don't know that, but yeah, we have a very large LGBTQ community here, and people support. So I started working at Brand New Congress. I ended up I worked there 2 full election cycles and halfway into a third. And so I left in 2021. So I worked there from 2017 to 2021. And we recruited candidates to run for office We had a nomination process where the community would nominate candidates to run. They would nominate people, so community members from their community. We did not have a process where people could self-nominate, which I really liked that.
Oh, I
So
love that.
instead, yeah.
I actually think that should be the way we do it. I mean, the Greeks were thinking about that. Like back in the day when they were coming up with the whole this democracy idea, they were entertaining the idea that, well, you can't nominate yourself. You have to basically be recruited. I think that's a damn good idea. I think that's the way we should do pretty much everything.
I would love to see it replicated again because there is a strength in the reluctant leader. Now, I will say I found out later that AOC was sort of planted and her boyfriend, or not her boyfriend, her brother nominated her, but she was selected and she wanted to do it. And so we could talk about how the difference between like an AOC and a Paula Jean Swearingen or a Cori Bush or a Rashida Tlaib that was pushed to run for office by her community. She wasn't nominated, but her community came to her and said, will you do this? Do this. And so she reluctantly took the mantle. I see a big difference in someone who wants to run for office and who has that sort of mindset. And I'm not saying that there aren't good people that are that way, but I have seen a huge difference between the reluctant leader who's asked by their community because of the community work that they've done being nominated. Like we had to talk to people and where they weren't politicians, we had to give them a lot of tools because some of these people were teachers. Some of these people were dentists or doctors or, we had one guy who was a sanitization worker. So he was a garbage man and he was awesome and he was politically savvy. I loved him. So
the way the system works and I think local, there's a little bit more breathing room, local is kind of a different story, but federally and I think in most cases, even at the state level, although there's a little more breathing room there too sometimes, but the system's set up in a way where it does not attract the most genuine of person. Typically it really doesn't. And if you want to keep your job, you basically have to play the game they want you to play. That's why, I mean, everybody loves to, whenever the squad comes up, it's always very fascinating to me because I see two extremes. I see on one extreme, I have people who just, they just want to blame them for everything. And it's just this counterproductive rage porn about the squad because you felt like maybe you just don't know how basic politics works. And you thought that AOC was going to ride a dragon and shoot healthcare out of her asshole to everybody. and you don't understand how basic policy works. However, on the other side of that, which I think is just as extreme, you have these people who literally treat them like they're royalty, like they have not done anything wrong. They see no problem with their refusal to vote as a bloc, and any criticism of them, they have a freaking meltdown. And I think both of those camps are extreme. Both of those camps are wrong. And both of those camps are the loudest ones on social media. But I don't know why I brought that up, actually. I don't know where I was going with the so in electoral politics in general, and I think this especially applies to something like the squad right now, and we're seeing it play out in real time. They basically faced a choice: play it the company way, or we're going to get rid of you as soon as we freaking can. And AOC, it looks like she's choosing to play it the company way. Cori Bush didn't want to play it the company way. They got rid of her. Jamal Bowman trying not to play it the company way. They got rid of him. And I think Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, I think they're trying. And we'll see what happens. They're going to try to get rid of them.
Oh, yeah.
They're definitely going to try.
I had Senate candidates that won their primaries as Senate candidates going up against the GOP in Maine, in places like West Virginia with Paula Jean Swearingen. We had Betsy Sweet in Maine. We had Zach. I always forget his last name. We had multiple candidates across the country running who won their primaries who were Senate candidates. And I'm focusing on the Senate candidates because we always hear about Joe Manchin and how the Democratic Party needs to fill the gap, and bring on more Senate candidates so we can finally codify Roe v. Wade and we can finally have healthcare, and that the only thing blocking any of this progress is that, it's a split Senate. And so, but what I saw was, since these candidates were running kind of outside of the party and refused to play party ball and were not handpicked by the party, they ran on a Democratic ticket because it's easier to get ballot access running Democrat in some of these states than it is to try to run independent. So they ran, and Zach Ringelstein, one of the things that they told Zach Ringelstein is, you have to pay $250,000 to be on our printed materials. Otherwise, we're not going to have you on there. Wow. And we're just going to say there's not a Senate race. So when it said Senate, they literally the Democratic Party leadership printed up flyers that said non-applicable for Senate, that no one was running.
Wow. I mean, that's what happens when you're not really a political. You're just a club. I mean, they are just a club.
Yeah.
And they can do whatever they want. I mean, the system is just so ridiculous. And people don't realize, like, we have to change the rules as far as what they can get away with.
Oh, yeah. In West Virginia, party leadership pushed unions to support Shelley Moore Capito, a Republican. We could get into her running against Joe Manchin. They were really terrible there, but it's even more appalling to me. That was terrible enough because he is basically. But it was even crazier to me that once she won the primary, they were willing to endorse Shelley Moore Capito over her, one of the most right-wing people in Congress. But yeah. I saw this repeated over and over and over again. My candidates, they would even call my candidates and they would try our candidates and try to intimidate them off the ballot. They would give ballot challenges just like they do to the Greens. And we had a couple of Green candidates. We had some independent candidates. It was the same across the board. It didn't matter if someone registered Democrat or didn't. If you were not hand selected by the party would do everything to keep you off the ballot. Anthony Clark is one of the craziest. He was running against Danny Davis in Illinois and in the Chicago area. And Danny Davis's team went around, and when Anthony turned in his ballot signatures, because you have to have signatures to get on the ballot there, they went around to the older people. They targeted the older people, and they said, this guy's not really running for Congress. He lied to you. Sign this document. Wow. Now, it went all the way to court, and they threw out the Democratic Party's challenge. They threw out Danny Davis's challenge. However, at that point, it drained like $40,000 from Anthony's campaign. The whole point of that was to drain his coffers because he wasn't taking any corporate money, and he, didn't have $4 million to waste on litigious efforts. Yeah. So that was their way of hamstringing his campaign because he was very popular and he was polling well. And then when there's one other thing with that, when it came election day in the polling booths, and this is illegal, Danny Davis's team put flyers in the polling booth up and down the ticket for Democrats and didn't have Anthony listed.
Wow. I mean, it's just the things you hear about. I mean, out near me, there was a progressive candidate who made some waves her first time around. She's a friend of mine. Her name's Fatima Iqbal Zubair. She ran in my district for state assembly. She did a really good job, and she was kind of building some momentum. So they redistricted her. She was able to move into the district where she had already built the infrastructure. So she was actually able to make the move, and she did. So they just, used even more corporate money to crush her a second time. I mean, it's just amazing the lengths they'll go to prevent progressive change. And that doesn't even touch on the dirty tricks that the Republican Party does. It's just on the grassroots level, the Republicans don't have to because they're not pretending. The Republicans aren't pretending. They're like, if you're a grassroots oriented, you're not welcome here. Whereas the Democrats are like, oh, yeah, that's us. We're supposed to be the alternative, except we're not really. I don't mind if your dog barks occasionally, Zaynab. You don't need to.
Sorry.
You don't need to be so worried about it. It doesn't. It's okay. We're a dog friendly show here, and a cat friendly show. Lucy's meowed plenty of times near the mic, and I just kind of pick her up and let people know that's what's happening.
I don't have like a studio that I could be closed in, you know. I don't have that luxury, so like my dogs are just there. It's fine. And if I did close them out in a room, they would be at the door barking the whole time.
They'd freak out. I mean, well, I don't close my door ever because Lucy. I mean, yeah, she is not a fan of closed doors in general. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's not something we do in my household. Just not a thing. Well, I mean, except
what's going on in there? What are you doing?
Yeah, right. What am I missing?
Yeah.
I have FOMO. You can open the worst is when I have a deck, and the worst is like she's allowed out on the deck because she's an indoor cat, but on the deck, like where's she gonna go? It's just like a little balcony deck, and she's just there with me. So she's allowed out there, and she likes it. But she'll always be indecisive whether she wants in and out. So she'll sit there and she'll meow at the screen. I'll open the screen, and then she'll just stand right. It'll be like, are you in or out? Because the flies have already decided they're going in. So which one are you?
She's a toddler. She's the
coolest, though. They're the best. Our pets. We just love them so much. We let them do whatever they want.
Same.
But so. Well, I want to talk about this with you, and I've talked about this in other capacities, especially when it was more timely, but I've never talked about it with you. And that, of course, is the movement for a People's Party. So I'll kind of start with my full circle, or not. Well, I guess full circle is not the right word, but kind of like my trajectory with that situation, and then kind of turn it over to you. So I was at Convergence in 2017. Were you there? Because we didn't know each other back then.
I went to the People Summit in 2017, but I don't think I went to Convergence.
Wasn't it the same thing? Was it something?
The People
Summit was the thing in Chicago,
mm-hmm.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I was at both, but what I'm referring to is the Convergence conference, which moved. It was the Draft Bernie situation that eventually led to Movement for a People's Party.
I wasn't there. Yeah.
Okay. So I was there in 2017, and it was in DC. And I'll tell you, it was an amazing event. I mean, the DSA was there, the SA was there, the Green Party was there, the Extinction Rebellion was there, different environmentalists were there, different policy-based organizations were there, nonprofits were there, media makers were there, activists were there, journalists were there, concerned citizens were there, comedians were there, musicians were there. It was amazing. And for the first time in my life, I really felt like, wow, there's a lot of people who kind of feel the way I've felt my entire adult life, that this country needs actual real progressive change that's never on the frickin' menu politically. And there's enough of us that if we all could find a way to channel our energy together, we could be a force to be reckoned with. And we could maybe, change the rules in this country so that we had more checks and balances in our politics, and we had third parties that probably wouldn't be the major parties, but they'd have a little bit of power. Maybe they'd have a few congressional seats, a few Senate seats, and that would just shift the Overton window big time. And for the first time in my freaking life, I felt like that was attainable. So I believed in the mission of what I thought at the time the People's Party was all about. And I still do think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And then as time went by, things just kind of kept going backwards. It seemed like everything was going the opposite direction of the momentum that convergence had, slowly but surely. And it became clear that the organization didn't have much of an interest in a ground up approach. At least people at the top didn't feel that way. And then I did a little thought experiment for myself because it became basically just a Twitter project. And I counted the tweets one day, and I realized that over 80% of all the tweets were just about insulary insider podcast beefs. And that was it. The other 20% was about policy, but only one or two policies, like not even. So I kind of thought, for somebody who's just an outsider to all this, how would they ever be drawn to this as a political party? Hey, what's your political party all about? Well, we hate this podcaster and like this one. Okay, but I don't listen to any of those podcasts.
I have a story about that in a little bit to tell you.
Yeah. No. I know I'm really building this up, but I just
take your time. That's really funny. I've got some insight
to you, and then just hand it over. So I kind of felt like, I don't think this is a movement for a political party. I think this is a marketing and podcast promotions. So I basically said, I'm not going to be part of this anymore, not in the formal sense. I'd love to see it succeed, but I just don't feel like it's going in a good direction. And then this stuff came to the surface with you and your situation, which at the time I knew you. I didn't know you were the person for a while. Like I didn't know the person was you. I just knew there was a situation, and the way that situation was handled from what is supposed to be an official party account was one of the most ridiculous things. And I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, but it was one of the most ridiculous freaking things I've ever seen in my life. And I hope it's okay I'm talking about this. I hope I'm not like
that's fine.
But I mean,
time has passed. So
no, I understand. But it's like, I mean, they were publishing text messages, private text messages. They were like, this reveals. I was like, this reveals nothing. All this reveals is that two people were in an intimate, private relationship, and now they're not anymore. And you're putting their correspondence on blast. That's all this reveals. Like, what? And then they, accuse you of infiltration without any evidence whatsoever. The response was so absurd that I kind of was looking at that, and I said, okay, first of all, if an attorney advised you to do any of this, that attorney should be disbarred immediately. Second of all, if any, because I'm a registered Green now. At the time, I was just registered no party preference, but I've always been friends to, a lot of Greens. If the Green Party would have done something like that, if the Green Party would have had a similar situation and responded that way, I would have called Jill Stein personally,
right? True.
And been like, Jill, who did this, and what the hell are they thinking? And I don't want to spill the tea on something that you mentioned off mic, but I said hold that thought, because the last thing I wanted to say on this is, when I saw that, my first thought was, this is a cult, not a political party. So floor is yours. I know I threw a lot at you.
You're right. I'll give just a little bit of background. So when Biden was elected, unfortunately and sadly, brand new Congress had made kind of a turn and had started just wanting to endorse more establishment Democrats. They had become more fundraising focused, less focused on the mission, if that makes any sense. They were talking about endorsing people like John Fetterman. And I was like, dude doesn't even support Medicare for all. We were the group that helped launch the Green New Deal, Medicare for all. I mean, of course, the Green Party had a Green New Deal or had something similar as well. And so I give them credit for that. But brand new Congress helped to bring Abolish ICE to the forefront. So many different issues we helped to make national names, kitchen table issues, because our candidates ran on them, and it helped to get the word out. And because we had mass organizing in conjunction with running races, which I think you need both to work hand in hand. And we worked with groups like PNHP and NU on healthcare, that sort of thing. But anyway, I digress. I brought it up to my organization there that, hey, look, you've got an ED that works like 5 hours a week and he's got a contract, but 4 of our people who are basically staff members don't. We probably should fix this. And also, why are we talking about endorsing people like John Fetterman? And if you are going to make this turn, you have to let your supporters know instead of just continuing to take their money and continuing to say that you're not making this shift. You have to tell people. That's the only fair thing. You have to be transparent, right? But if you're going to make a shift to be Democratic Party establishment when we were always an anti-establishment organization, you need to let people know. That's a big shift. So they ended up letting me go, in part because I challenged AOC on giving money to corporate Dems when our candidates were running against them. She gave money to incumbents that our candidates on her slate were running against.
That was so cringe. And then there was the one guy who denied it. There was I think it was Connor Lamb. Which I went to high school with him.
Funny.
Yeah.
Oh, did you really?
I went to high school with Connor Lamb, yeah. He's a nice guy in high school. I don't know what he's up to now, but yeah. Well, I know a little bit of what he's up to now, but
Not great. Not great.
Yeah, not great. Well, I mean, I had some friends who, because they were his friend and because, the alternative was just a straight up Trumper, they kind of worked with him a little bit and were trying to. And he's one of those people that he just ran for office because it was just something you were taught to do.
Yeah.
He doesn't really he didn't have opinions on anything. I had one friend / colleague / confidant tell me at one point they went up to him about charter schools. And we're like, so we want to frame your position on charter schools. And he just kind of was like, I don't know. Is that a thing? What are people mad about charter schools? What's the deal? He just didn't know. He had no idea why anybody would have an opinion one way or another on charter schools. Why is that?
What?
Yeah. So anyway, sorry. I didn't mean to.
Typical politician.
So brand new Congress was not your bag. So you found your way to the People's Party.
Yes. Actually, Nick Brana had called. I had started volunteering there. And when they saw me in the chat, it kind of blew up. Lots of people we had 5,000 comments. Everyone was excited. And then the board asked me to come work with them to help them get candidate recruitment pipeline going and recruit candidates in a similar way we had at Brand New Congress and help them with candidate training. Because I had trained everything from, I'd done campaign launches all the way up to get out the vote efforts toward the end of the race, all the way through and kind of fundraising. So they wanted me to come on and help with fundraising and that. After a little while, the board had decided that they wanted to make me executive director. Which was the People's Party was supposed to have elected people as well as leadership on the board and in certain departments, and then some staff members. So the ED would be more of a staff member role, but here's where I made a huge mistake. I had friends that had left the party already, and I knew that there was a petitioning that there was a petition that was going on about the way that the party was shifting on policy. And I believed those individuals and I trusted my friends that left, my friends like Renee Johnson and others. I trusted them. I knew because I'd worked with Renee for years at a Brand New Congress. But I was naive in thinking, okay, if they make me ED, then I can, help to foster a more egalitarian system. I can make sure that the voting happens and that we do have elections and that they're fair. And I can, check on the policy and help make sure that policy is voted on and that we start running candidates. I had all these goals of what, and board members were saying that they loved this. And the people I was talking to in groups were like, yes, we need this. But that was naive. And I didn't realize how naive it was because I had realized after a while of being there that a lot of their membership was sort of neoconservative. And on top of that, it was a cult of personality built around Nick Brana, the person who ran the organization. So it was interesting in in the way that, you know, I hadn't experienced a setting like that before. But as a public relations major, I was very familiar with cults. We had to learn about that a lot in school. And I had seen it, you know, we've all seen it, either in our lives, people impacted by it, or we've seen what sort of fundamentalism does to people when it's sort of devoid of any kind of values, and it boils down to just, like I said, a cult of personality. Now, there were amazing volunteers there. There were people that really cared and people that really wanted to do the work.
Sure.
But this core leadership that had been built up was, you know, built around loyalty, and it was sort of a cult infrastructure. And it's funny you mentioned the podcast.
And just I do want to make a qualifier there. When I do say that, I'm not wagging my finger at all the individuals.
Exactly.
There were some wonderful people involved with that organization. It's just, you know, some of the decisions that were made at the top, slowly but surely, it just revealed that, you know, this institution has no interest in becoming a political party. And, you know, it made me feel all the worse for the people who did put genuine time and work and effort into building that.
Yeah, exactly. And there were people, like I had mentioned, but when you have sort of sorry, the sun was blinding me, so I turned down my blades there. I hope that it didn't make things too dark here. But it was
you look good. Yeah, you're
right
good.
in the eyes, you know, that kind of thing where you're like when you're driving the car and you have to put the blinder down because the sun's killing you. But yeah. Sorry about that. But it was intentional, but it was kind of interesting because toward my last bit of time there, I remember a meeting that was had where Brana had made this presentation that, you know, we have to focus on the podcasters. And that most of our social media, because I was saying our social media needs to be about platforms. It needs to be about issues. And we should be talking to like our supporter base, but then we should also be talking about what's happening locally, and that we really need to run local races, because even if we ran independent.
That was my attitude. Yeah, that was my, and they made it very clear they were not interested in such a thing.
65% of seats, and I am doing articles on it now, but 65% of seats then were abandoned. The Democratic Party had abandoned the 50-state strategy. They had left states that would support a lot of the platforms that the People's Party had. And it was a huge opportunity to run people locally, even if they ran independent, and build grassroots up that way. But this idea was that Jimmy Dore was going to run for president, and that we were going to focus on the podcasters, and that's how we were going to grow, because most of our supporters were coming from podcasts. And I was like,
that's a terrible idea. That's not how it works. Like that's just not how it works. Like you don't, I mean, you build something from the ground up. That's how you build power. It's never worked. And I had that same conversation with people, and you know, like I had that same conversation with Nick, similar to the one you had. And I said, well, why aren't we shooting for a mayor? Why aren't we shooting for, you know, city council, a school board, and still shoot for the stars as well, just to kind of get those big bumps and stuff. But yeah, it just seemed like it was just a big public relations experiment. That's absolutely absurd. The idea that you're going to go from an unknown entity to running for president, and I don't know how they sold the idea to Cornel West. I have no idea how that even happened and how he went for it. And, you know, and hey, look, I'm a Green. I'm not a Green because I think the Greens party is perfect. They're not. I'm not a Green because, but I think that the Green Party has the best idea as far as how we change the rules to become a competitive party and to kind of change the way our politics works. And that's why I'm a Green, you know, I realize, and look, over 100 Greens hold office. And here's another thing I'm going to say, you know, I think at this point, I don't even think they're pretending that they're trying to be a political party, but you look at the years that they were trying to be a political party, and it was about 6 years. I mean, it was about 2017 through about last year or so. They ran in nothing. They got nobody elected. the Green Party had won their first election within 5 years. And that was back before the internet. I'm not saying the internet makes things easier or harder, but it certainly makes things faster.
True.
It certainly makes things faster than back in the day when the only way you were getting the word out was buying ad space in what few lefty magazines existed in this freaking country. That was how they did it back then. They would like lefty magazines were Xeroxed at a machine, distributed around the country. And there was probably a little blurb that said, "Hey, we're the Green Party. Send a thing to this P.O. box and we'll send you some materials." And the whole process will take about 3 months. Now you can just do that in a tweet. It takes 10 seconds. So it certainly is faster now. I don't know if it's better or worse, harder or easier, but it's faster. And even still, Green Party won an election within 5 years. This other experiment didn't even run a candidate in 6 and counting. And so,
well, that, and they had ballot out. You can't get state party status without organizing some, because it takes a lot of work. In each state, every state has different rules on how to become a state party. Every state has wildly different rules. It varies across the country. So crazy. Some states you have to have all these different district meetings, and then a number of signatures, and then conferences, in each state. You have to have a mini DNC, a mini convention in each district. And then, but then there's some that you just file and you pay a fee and you get, 1,500 signatures, and then you get party status. So it varies wildly. Right now, in order to maintain party status, once you have party status in a lot of states, you have to run POTUS in order to maintain party status. Because in these states, you either have to run a statewide race, which is governor, secretary of state, or you have to run POTUS. Well, if it's in between election cycles, that year you have to run POTUS. And so people will say, why is the Green Party running president again? Why aren't they just focusing on local? Well, for them, that makes sense because they already have party status in so many states, in the majority of states, and they don't want to lose party status. So I give
people
the
don't
Green
realize
Party,
that part. They don't realize that it's like, well, they'll lose their party status if they don't run for president. And also, I mean, when people say things like, well, why aren't the Green Party, or, I mean, it's interesting. And again, I'm not saying the Green Party's perfect. There's plenty of things to criticize, but it's interesting, the cycle of, why doesn't the Green Party build local? Why don't they run for local things? Oh, they do. In fact, here's a list of all the Greens that are elected around the country. None of those things matter. Like, okay, well, which is it? Which is it? I mean, it can't be both ways. Either you're going to criticize them for not having enough electoral power, or you're going to criticize them for not focusing on, small enough types of electoral power. It can't be both. So when they prove you wrong on one, you can't just, move the goalposts again. But we go through the same thing every 4 years. And I mean the collective we. I don't mean just the Green Party. But
it's messaging and it's intentional propaganda, because we saw as soon as CARE, the Muslim institution CARE, released the fact that 50% of Muslims were going to vote Green, the Democratic Party launched a messaging campaign immediately to discredit Jill Stein and to say, why are they running? Even AOC did an Instagram with the exact same messaging that the rest of the party members were putting forward. And this idea was, why are we running POTUS when they're not focusing locally? Yeah. Well, they are focusing locally, and they're running president so that they can keep ballot access. In order for them to maintain party status and to get ballot access for Jill to be on almost every single ballot in the country besides the ones that the Democratic Party are pushing her off of, there has to be organizing. They got it in Hawaii. You have to organize. I think you have to get 5,000 signatures in Hawaii to even be a presidential candidate on the ballot. So they are doing work to even be on the ballot. She has to be doing some kind of organizing. So that's so disingenuous. And I will tell you, you want to know the most ironic thing, Ron? The most ironic thing is that the Democrats, 75% of seats across the country are uncontested, meaning no one's running them but one person. And almost all of those are Democratic parties. Almost all of those are GOP seats.
Yeah.
Almost all of them. The Democrats aren't running anywhere. Dem
No, it's
Nationals
crazy.
not running
The
anywhere.
Democratic Party is just an empty husk in so many parts of the country. It's nuts. And they have all the money in the world to not be that. So where do you get your hope?
I look at okay, so one of my places of expertise is understanding where voters are. I've talked to hundreds of thousands of voters, and that's no exaggeration because I organized for 4 years and did phone banking every day for like 3 hours for candidates and for my org. So
person.
yeah. And had a spreadsheet where I would track sentiment and that sort of thing. One of what I discovered that was so cool, and polls show this too. So, polls back up what I have to say, but I learned it, from firsthand experience. Most people in the country, so I could have a conversation with someone who was self-identified conservative, let's say, and I start talking to them about how, we have a shortage in healthcare, and how it could take 6 months to get, a doctor's appointment, and how you can't find a primary care physician. And then they will agree with you on that. And then you go on to talk about something like, people that go to medical school should maybe be able to go for free so that our kids can be a doctor or a nurse or whatever it is that they want to be in the medical field. Why can't our kids do that? Why is there elite gatekeeping through pricing people out? And we should pay for that. And then you go on to talk about cutting out insurance as a middleman, and most people agree. And this is shown in polls. People that even identify sometimes as conservative or whatever, they will support policies like less police militarization. They will support policies like fair immigration, humane immigration. Most people didn't like the separation of parents and children at the border. Most people support universal health care. Almost everyone is anti-war. Almost everyone wants to cut military spending. And one of the things that 98% of U.S. citizens agree on is that they want big money out of politics. There's too much corruption, and they don't trust either party. 98%. Mm-hmm. So what I learned and what gives me hope is that the populace, the people, are not reflected by the two-party system and by these people that are running our country, by these mega corporations, by the Democrat and Republican Party oligarchy, by the system is not reflected. And it gives me hope because they are not paying attention. And if you have the Democratic Party not running anyone in any states, and now the GOP is super comfortable, I think electoral is just one tool in the toolbox. There's lots of other tools. We could grow co-ops. We could grow community organizing. We could do what would be considered kind of like a mutual aid. We can become more community centric. All of those things could make a difference. I think growing small businesses makes a difference. I'm not anti someone owning a home or owning their own business. I am anti somebody having, 300 employees and treating them like garbage. Yeah. But I'm not anti someone having a sole proprietorship and doing like painting the inside of houses for a living.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Or being a bricklayer or something. I think that's silly. But my hope is that since all these seats are abandoned and all of this has happened, there's a gap. There's a window. And now the Democratic Party has gone so far right wing that they're basically the GOP of 10 years ago. They are. This genocide is horrific too. And I think that it has really shined a light on what the Democratic Party is. I'm not saying that gives me hope. It doesn't. It's horrible. But what I am saying is I think that the populace is at a place where there's an opportunity for something else to start up again that's better. And I've been considering what that could look like, maybe a different model of run for something but I think whatever it is needs to be extremely issues focused. And I don't think that it should take up the mantra of the name socialism or communism or any isms, or I think that it should just start as an idea of here's the policies we have and we're going to run people on them, and we're encouraging people. It's in a lot of places, it can be really easy to run independent. You don't even have to have a party. Now, I support the Green Party. I support third party movement. but the fact is, in most of these seats, you don't even have to be under a party.
Right. And sometimes that just takes away any potential stigma or any potential preconceived notions, and people can just hear you out. So, yeah, I mean, from a messaging standpoint, I think you're right on. The last thing I want to say, because we do have to wrap up here, but I wanted to share this with you. This is sort of like one of those weird timing in the universe situations. You know, I just happened, and this will air a little bit later, but as of us recording this episode, I scheduled you, I think about a week ago or something like that. I just saw something you tweeted. I wanted to invite you on the show. So I just said, hey, what are you doing next week? And that's my booking process, folks. And,
I love it.
and you said, yeah, Tuesday works. And so we scheduled this recording. 2 nights ago, I lost my aunt.
I'm sorry.
And thank you. And yeah, I mean, she was sick and she's at peace now. And she is from South Carolina. She's from a small town in South Carolina. And she is not a GOP person. She never was. And I saw this quote from her from my cousin, her daughter-in-law. And she remembered this quote of something she said, where she said, whenever I go and vote, I never win. The people I vote for, they can't, they don't really win around here. But I vote because I want there to be a record. And I want people to know that we don't all think the same. And that, we don't all think a certain way just because we're from the South. And I thought that was really powerful. And as a guy, and of course, I know that that's true because I'm a guy who has lived in the South myself and has traveled very extensively around the country. But yeah, I just thought that was a really cool sentiment. And I kind of feel like I see a little bit of that in what you do as well. I know you're more Appalachia. It's a little different, but I see some cross-pollination. So I thought it was a certain certain beautiful homage that you happen to be the guest I scheduled, now. So thanks for everything you do.
I think boiling it down to the pragmatism of people arguing, that 400,000 people are going to die as opposed to 500,000 people takes away, we're going to vote for Dems because it's slightly, even if it's 1% lesser evil, takes away that dynamic that your aunt so beautifully spoke about and so eloquently spoke about, and that's voting your conscience has merit. Sure. Voting and to stand up for something instead of always voting against something has merit. And if we are talked into not exercising that because, that vote you're voting for someone who loses, who cares? The only way we can find out if we're going to vote for somebody who wins or not is by voting. If everyone who supported ending this war, which is 70% of the country, heard about, that's the hard part, but then voted for Jill Stein, she'd win.
That'd be pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They'd find a way. If that actually happened, they would say they were like, Russia hacked everything. That's honestly exactly what they would do. If all the was like, what, she's the true anti-war option, which she is, and everybody voted for her, they would just say that they hacked our election. But anyway, I want to keep it positive where you ended it. Zeynab, where can people go to learn more about you?
You could go to Bullhorn Bulletin at Substack. You can also go to my handles right here, Zeynab Day on Twitter. I have a launch coming out. I am working on the last of my videos tonight, so I will be launching that in the morning. I'm very excited. We have 3 articles coming out, and I am doing a fundraiser, so please give if you can, because I have nothing, and and a little bit of help getting it started would be huge. But yeah, we're going to be doing interviews and writing about things like we were talking about today, the things that are often overlooked and that mainstream media never touches when it comes to electoral politics. But also we'll be doing, in a few months, I'll be offering for anyone who signs up for a paid subscription on Substack, we'll be doing free training for candidates and for organizations and for nonprofits. You can come to my free trainings and Yeah. So I think that'll be really cool because we used to have a lot of that out there, Ron, but I haven't seen a lot of the left-wing organizing training and stuff like that anymore.
I think a lot of people have kind of been soured to electoralism, but it is, like you said, it is still a tool in the toolkit. And if that's your bag, that's fine. Let it be your bag. I mean, somebody's got to. And some people are meant for it, some people aren't. I'm not, so I don't pretend I am. It's not my bag. But, some of the people who are more intertwined in that world, I find interesting, and I like talking to them like yourself. So
well, we'll be doing other things too, like how to build a co-op or how to start a nonprofit or, those kinds of things. So it'll be in and outside of electoral politics because there's a lot of different kind of organizing, but it all has similar veins to it. And the bones are the same, no matter what you're trying to build as far as reaching people and getting them out and getting them motivated to do something. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm so glad you had me on, Ron. I always love talking to you. Sometime we'll need to do something that's just sheerly funny. I used to be a stand-up comedian, and I lost my funny bone because of politics. I'm getting it back. Why'd I stop? I became a mom. I did it before I was pregnant, and then while I was pregnant, I was like this big on like stage doing stand-up, which was awesome. It was so much fun.
Some of my favorite comedians are moms. So it's never too late to jump back in, is what I'm saying.
Maybe one day. I am going to do some funny skits on my show. I know that sounds weird doing news, but I got a few coming up too. Right.
Well, Zeynab, thanks for doing this.
All right. Thanks, Ron. It was so good to see you. Thanks for having me.
That was Zeynab Day. Be sure to check out all our stuff. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxon. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a 5-star review, would you? This is still a very new podcast. Every 5-star review helps out a lot. If you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can go to patreon.com/RonPlacone. For Give What You Can level, you get an exclusive additional podcast. You get the 1000 podcast before they're released to the public. You get full stand-up clips not available anywhere else. And you get insider info on all of my upcoming projects and films. And I'm dropping some audio from shows that I used to do when I had a morning show in Nashville. I'm dropping some interviews. These are some old interviews from the vaults. Some of the guests featured W. Kamau Bell, a full extended interview from Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull that's never been released, and an interview that I did with Jimmy Dore years before we were working together. That's all available over on patreon.com/RonPlacone. I'm going to be dropping that soon, and you can join for Give What You Can level. It's a really cool community. All right. 53 episodes down. I guess the noteworthy number is 75, right? We'll go with it. See you next week. Peace. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.